Okay, wonderful. So thank you very much for joining, everyone. This is another webinar by the Renewables Grid Initiative in partnership with some other organizations under the webinar series Energy and Nature. Here we look at pioneering approaches to really marrying energy infrastructure and nature protection. And today, specifically, we're going to be looking again at vegetation management with some fantastic examples from the Iberian Peninsula. So we have colleagues here with us from Spain and Portugal. Just to introduce myself, I'm Innis. I'm the manager for energy ecosystems. So that means I work on all of our onshore environmental projects. And I'll give a brief introduction before then I pass the word to the experts we have in the room. So first of all, just some housekeeping. We are recording, and this recording will go online afterwards along with the presentation. So feel free to share this. We will be active on social media throughout. So feel free to check us out on Twitter and LinkedIn and also promote this in your networks. I would ask people joining to rename yourselves. As you see in this lovely picture of me, if you click to the top right, there's 3 dots. You can go there and click rename and to put your name and organization so that when we get to the discussion part of the webinar at the end, we can see who we're talking to. That's always nice. Fantastic. Yeah. So here's the agenda. We'll start now with this brief introduction to the topic. For me, a bit of context as well, why we're talking about this topic. And then we'll pass first of all to Xavier Munill from the Universidad Autónoma de Barcelona and Bufalvent, who will speak about the work done in Spain to measure and increase biodiversity in grid corridors. Then we'll have a brief Q&A for comprehension questions before passing to Pedro Marques, who works for HEN, the TSO from Portugal, and leads up their vegetation management work. And he'll give some examples of the work that they do over in Portugal, which is very diverse and interesting for many different reasons. And then I will grab the word again and give an overview of a practice again from Spain, a very specific one, which is grid grazing in Spain, or pastoreo en red. This one, and I should say also the work Xavier will present, is done in collaboration with Red Eléctrica, also known as Redea, the grid operator, the TSO from Spain. As I said, at the end, there'll be an open discussion, which 20 minutes, I think we can make it a bit more, hopefully 25 minutes. So if you have questions until then, do be writing them in the chat and we'll be kind of collecting these and I'll moderate the Q&A session at the end then. Okay, so first of all, to kind of give a bit of context on who RGI is, most of you probably know us already, but for those of you who don't, we are a collaboration, we're a non-profit organization based in Berlin, and we bring together TSOs, so transmission system operators, and NGOs, environmental NGOs, social NGOs, together to work on various topics and to push forward a fair, transparent, and sustainable grid development for the energy transition. We work on different areas. This includes technical innovation, system integration of renewables. This includes communication, engagement, public participation. And finally, and the work that I am active on, we work on environmental protection. And when it comes to environmental protection, there's 3 main topics really. One of them being bird protection around the grid, another one being multifunctionality of energy infrastructure. So how can we really get the most out of the energy infrastructure that's out there? And finally, and relevant for today, is vegetation management. This webinar then, you may have joined the webinar back in the summer where we spoke to some experts on what is vegetation management, what is integrated vegetation management, also known as ecological corridor management, what are the possibilities and what are some examples. Today then we want to zoom in a bit more specifically on examples from the Iberian Peninsula to really get the details and allow you the opportunity then to expand your knowledge from concrete examples from on the ground. I think all of the work that we do here is extremely relevant, but for me, I would say vegetation management is one of the most exciting because it's really this part where energy infrastructure is, it's very direct, you know. I mean, there's a lot of ins and outs to this. It's not that grid operators own the land that they run the infrastructure along, but they're obliged to manage the vegetation beneath the grid to prevent fires, to ensure security of supply. And in these actions, then there is a lot of opportunities to change the management systems to really create new opportunities for biodiversity, for ecosystems, for reconnecting ecosystems, But not just that, there's new opportunities for the grid operators themselves in terms of costs, in terms of new partnerships. This is a new opportunity to engage the public in a very palpable thing. You know, energy infrastructure is unavoidable. So by looking at new innovative techniques, we can engage people in a new way, which has then knock-on effects for engagement and public acceptance. Also, as we'll speak in this example, through partnerships with rural communities, it's a way for grid operators to really give back or to engage local populations. I think that's enough from me. I would close this session for now and give then the screen to Xavier, who will speak to us about the work done over in Catalonia. Xavier,
yeah.
You.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Xavier Munill. I present my. Oops. Yes. Yeah. I will share the presentation. No, it's not this.
Wonderful. We see it.
Yeah. Do you see it? Okay. I am going to present this project called Naturaleza en Red. Nature on the lines or on the net. And I introduce myself. My name is Xavier Munill, but this belongs to a group from Maria Font and Anna Morton and me. We are teachers of the Autonomous University. And I will be talking about rural spaces that always have been in ecology treated like degraded places. But I will change, or we change the mind a little bit, and we'll call it like biodiversity islands, because we have like done a transformation in the way we see these places. Yep. Sorry, it's not working. Yeah. This project appeared by 3 chances. Like 3 years ago, we also worked for a little NGO, conservation NGO, worried about nature protection, and we just were worried in that moment in butterflies. We love butterflies, and we designed a butterfly monitoring scheme in a place we love as well, just to enjoy butterflies. And we knew in there we had to have like some biodiversity hotspots, because we know it already that there were like flower meadows and open spaces, and so we were expecting to find a lot of butterflies in some places, and we already know which kind of butterflies we were going to find, because it was the perfect habitat. But our surprise, the second chance, was that we found not only the biodiversity hotspots we were expecting, we found a lot more. And that was not on our plan. And we wonder why this was happening. And all these hotspots were under a big or a little power line. The forest management under the power lines that open a little bit the forest create little islands on a desert of forest that was good for in that moment butterflies. Okay, in that moment was amazing for us. The third chance that it's all of we three, we were working in different in that moment kind of monitoring schemes present in Europe, and one of them was the UK pollinator monitoring scheme, and we translated in that moment because we needed for the university and we adapted to the Catalan reality. We call it CEPOC, and we were finding a lot of butterflies in that places. We checked it with pollinators, and amazingly, there was a lot of pollinators in there, something unexpected. So we had all the pieces of the puzzle. We had like an unexpected thing. We had the different kind of monitoring schemes present in Europe in that moment. So we designed this project, Naturaleza en Red, that was a pilot test for a study of the biodiversity established under the electric lines as a reservoir of open ecosystems. Because this texts that are worried about the biodiversity in whole Europe always are explaining that the biodiversity of open areas is the one that is more endangered. And when we also wanted at that moment to establish an easy assessment protocol to evaluate how these open spaces under the power lines done by the forest management were acting as islands of biodiversity. This is a project of University of Barcelona, Autonomous University of Barcelona. We do it with Redeia. Redeia at that moment was, Red Eléctrica was a little bit surprised because it was not its idea. It was an idea, a little idea of a little conservation NGO that saw in that moment that this was like something even to preserve because many of these species were endangered. Yeah. And as a university, we designed an experiment. We looked for 3 different conditions. We did this in a natural park in Catalonia called Montseny. And we looked for 3 different conditions. One was power line with forest management under the power line in the middle of a really dense forest. So we wanted to see if under the power line was acting like a reservoir of open species or open ecosystem species. And to check this, we had to look for a power line in an open area against an open area as well. So we had to corroborate that power lines didn't exclude or didn't attract somehow this biodiversity. And in our 3rd case, we looked for a power line that was not managed for 3-4 years. So it was at the end of its management. It was really close, and we wanted to compare it to their habitat next to the power line that was a managed forest, was a really open forest. So we were wondering if this power line still work as open ecosystem species reservoir. So we designed this. During 2 years nearly, we were doing butterfly transects, pollinator transects every 15 days, maximum flower density transects. We were checking how many flowers, how many pollinators, how many butterflies of each species. And we also were, looking for and if there were more micro mammals, more mice, more foxes, more. We use all the monitoring schemes we could to, at the end, design which were the most easy indicators we could use to do our assessment process. We did this under the power lines, and we did this under the forests next to the power lines. Yeah. Now, just focusing on the results. This is the control station. So an open habitat with a power line that was open as well. So open against open. So logically, we found, logically, I don't know if it's so logically. Many people think electric lines exclude some kind of animals like bees or butterflies or this kind of animals that they say they can sense electric fields, but no, we found exactly the same. We start in July 2020, and this graph finish in May of 2021. This valley in here, it's the winter. We also check things in winter because normally monitoring schemes do not work in winter, but we did it just to assess what was happening in winter. So this was one summer, and this was the spring. And yeah, so in the control, we found in richness of butterflies, in an abundance of butterflies, exactly the same. But when we went to the experiment, when we looked for richness, the number of different species, we could see the number of species of butterflies under the line always was much more bigger than the green line that was the forest next to the line. Yep. So we had more species under the line. And we also had more abundance. Here we cannot see nearly the green line because in butterflies do not live in forests or do not love closed areas. So all the butterflies of the area were under the line where there is a forest management. Yeah. And finally, we did the same in the second experiment, where the line was so close and the forest was open, and we could see with not so nice data, but we could see even the line was close, it was still working as a reservoir of open ecosystem species, in this case butterflies. So that was a really nice result. Yeah. But this is butterfly abundance, and we present the data not in how many we count, in which percentage of increase there was in each place. And in number of species, we had increases of 1000%, and in abundance, we had increases of 7800%. So the percentage was so amazingly. This means these kind of animals are exactly there because forests are not really or are absolutely bad habitats for these species that are so endangered, the species that live in open places. Yeah, we did this also in pollinators, and we also found increases normally of 1000, nearly 2000% of pollinators under the power lines compared to next to the power lines. Yeah, and we also did this with maximum abundance of flowers under the power lines, and we had increases of 2 million%. Yeah, and even these lines looks flat here. If I zoom a little bit the graph, that flat line, we also can see increases of flowering of 40,000% under the power line compared to the forest next to the power line. So I'm showing a little bit how these places work as oases of open ecosystem species in deserts of dense forests. Yeah. And then our second part of the work was to elaborate an index to evaluate this. And we took the vegetation cartography and we reinterpret a little bit, separating open habitats and closed habitats. And we realized this is the where the power line was passing by, where it was managed under the line. This is an example. And this was like an island of a desert of forest. Yeah. So with a little bit of math and thinking, we elaborate an index that is using this change in abundance or change in richness in the percentage, and also using a cartography approach, which is the importance of the power line opening in a defined area, in a square kilometer. For example, a power line where that cross by an area that it's absolutely open, it's not giving anything else that it's already there. But the power line that is in a really dense forest where all these open ecosystem species have disappeared, it's a really good area to maintain. It's like a reservoir where all these animals only can live in there. This was not happening in tracks and roads because they do a much more intense forest management to cut the sites. So animals cannot live in there because they are killed every, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months, every time that the machines pass by. But under the power lines, due to the management, it's only done one every 3-4 years, and it's not agrochemicals are not being used So it's like eco places where they are open once every some years, and it becomes then an oasis. Yeah. So this is what we did. We did this until 2021, and now we are in the second phase, or in the second part of our project. We did this with 3 different conditions. Now we are working with many different conditions, with many different kinds of forests, also with some different kind of management under the forest. I don't know, really intense management, not really intense management, because it depends on the area. It's on the legislation how have to be managed the areas. We are also taking data or getting data from places being managed with ships as well. Even in agricultural areas, we are taking data, because we have realized that under the towers, where the big machines cannot pass, it do like a little oasis in a open area, but it's not natural, you know, fields with intense agriculture are not good for even pollinators, butterflies. So we are also taking data of that places. One of our goals is to look for the potential of each managed area under the power line as a biodiversity island. We do this with a cartography approach as well. And we are, taking also some data about how these areas also fix carbons, because theoretically they are excluded like places for carbon fixation, but they also work a little bit on that. And we are moving also a divulgation plan to change a little bit the mind that these rural degraded places, not really nice at the first sight for many part of the population. At the end, it's not this, it's a biodiversity island or oasis for open ecosystem species. And this is a little bit our project Naturaleza en Red. And I would like to thank Bufalvent, like the ones who originate the idea, Universidad Autónoma, because it's the one who is doing the project, and Redeia for their support and the opportunity today to thank you to be here, and all you be listening to our project. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Xavier, for that very, very interesting look into the work that you've done. I think it's fantastic that, I mean, to have such clear scientific evidence to really prove and show in a clear scientific way actually just how big the differences can be between the land underneath power lines and the surrounding areas. I mean, you said figures of between 1,000 and 8,000% increase in butterfly abundance, something was 48,000% higher of flowering plants. I mean, these are really huge figures. And so the expression islands of biodiversity in a desert really does ring true. So thanks very much. What we would do now is open the floor very briefly to any comprehension questions. So as I said, the discussion will go in around half an hour time after 2 more presentations. But if there's already questions for Xavier on anything that you've heard that you didn't quite understand, or you'd like to ask anything, I already see Francisco Moreira. Please go ahead. Feel free to turn your video on as well, Francisco. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Good morning or afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Xavier. Very interesting presentation. I just wanted to make a short comment. Of course, you are a butterfly fan, and as you are a butterfly fan, you call forests deserts. We should not overemphasize the potential of power lines. I mean, when we open the rights of way, we do impact on biodiversity associated to forests. So the main message from your side is that the type of management under power lines creates a habitat that is suitable for butterflies and pollinators. And of course, that impact depends on the context where the power line is. And for me, the more interesting information is that you show that there are no differences between below the power lines and adjacent open vegetation. Meaning that some of the potential fear, as you mentioned, of potential negative impacts was not observable. That does not mean that we need power lines to preserve butterflies, but it does mean that the type of management then creates the habitat without any changes in the species composition. Thanks.
Yeah, that's true. I'm a butterfly lover, and I'm a flower lover, and I'm also a tree lover. But and I understand, yeah, and these comments you are doing, there are many as a good project data. For example, we are working on this that power lines do not exclude any kind of the indicators we are, and we are counting butterflies of each species, pollinators of each group. So we are watching things really nice, and there are not differences. So this is a nice idea. And when I see forests, deserts of forest, I mean in places, this also depends on the place, because in places where forests have been growing, agricultural management have abandoned many places that were open some years ago, and now we have like really dense forests. Once a teacher of ecology told me that a forest is a place where it's not able to culture anything. So that became forest. So in some places, forests have become really dense, and this is the reason all these texts about the status of biodiversity are saying that the most endangered biodiversity we have right now used to be open ecosystems biodiversity, because open ecosystems, or they have become something industrial, something from intensive agriculture, or have disappeared because they have become closed forests. So this is in the way I say it. Of course, I understand as well the value of having nice, really mature forests, but we don't really have really nice mature forests because they are only 80 years old when they can live, I don't know, 1,000 years. So we have like teenage forests, but we are losing so in fast rates open spaces suitable for open ecosystem species, not only butterflies. These species, these places are also good for owls hunting mice. These species are also good for big macro mammals like natural corridors. So, and of course, we don't have to build power lines to preserve these animals, but these places, at the same time, they have a use to transport energy, have another nice use for biodiversity to create like quiet places to live in there.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the question, Francisco and Xavier, for the explanation, the expansion there. There's some interesting points. Jean-Francois, I see you have your hand raised. I'm sure it's a great question, but with an eye on the clock, I would maybe ask you to save your question for the discussion afterwards. And first of all, we'll go then over to Portugal, to our colleague Pedro Marques. Pedro, the floor is yours, and you can share your screen from now. Okay, wonderful. We see your presentation on full screen mode.
Okay, thank you so much. Hello, good morning to you all. I would like to thank Renewable Grid Initiative for this opportunity that is given to REN to present the work that we have been developing in our vegetation management and associated with our infrastructures. First of all, I would like to briefly introduce you to REN. REN operates in two main businesses, very high voltage electricity transportation and reception, regasification of liquefied natural gas along the storage, transportation, and distribution of natural gas. Our mission is to ensure the uninterrupted supply of energy, contributing to the community development and improving the quality of life of Portuguese people. Regarding the REN connections to the territory, REN has 35,000 hectares of right-of-way, power lines, and gas pipelines, of which 23,000 are located in forest areas. With regard to land use, bushes, pastures, and forests are the dominant land use. Regarding land occupation, eucalyptus is the dominant species, followed by cork oaks and maritime pine. If we had to convert these 23,000 hectares into a highway, REN have to manage the vegetation of an highway between Lisbon and Tehran. That's the impact of our vegetation that we have to implement at REN. In addition to this 35,000 hectares of right-of-way, of which, as I mentioned, 23,000 are located in forest areas, we also have to manage vegetation in more 1,000 hectares of our own properties where are located our installations. Taking into account REN Integrated Vegetation Management Plan, we annually manage around 9,000 hectares. And to achieve this goal, we count on the collaboration of several service providers in the forestry sector with a daily average that exceeds 200 workers. So which are the main objectives of this management? For us is security. Security for our infrastructures, of course, but also providing security for the territories, making these territories more resilient to rural fires. We also have other objectives, of course, such as creating value for the landowners, increase the biodiversity, and job creation at a local and a regional level. So between 2016 and 2021, we have managed almost 50,000 hectares. As you can see in this graphic, the evolution of the areas that has been executed under the power lines in the gas pipelines. And the photograph below, you can see the after intervention that has been done. So as I mentioned, the Integrated Vegetation Management Plan, and this plan aims to respond to the following strategic objectives. First, to comply with the current legislation. Legislation regarding the protection of the infrastructure against rural fires, power line safety regulations, and gas pipeline safety regulations. It's also a plan to help us to be efficient at the cost management, to increase the resilience of the infrastructures to extreme events, such as extreme rural fire, hurricanes, storms, freezing rain, and others. With regard to the sustainability-related objectives, it is essential to us to develop projects aimed at local communities and landowners to promote the promotion of biodiversity, but based on the principle of creating shared value. And about these objectives, I will show you two innovative approaches that we are implementing. The last strategic objective is, of course, the compliance with the measures defined in the environmental impact assessments. So the first innovative approach that I would like to show you is aligned with the ESG goal 15, life on land, where REN is contributing to the protection and restoration of native forests in Portugal. In collaboration with official authorities and the involvement of local communities and also with the landowners, between 2010 and 2021, REN proceeded with the land reconversion of 3,645 hectares of forest areas, mainly occupied with eucalyptus tree, that is a fast-growing tree species, involving more than 20,000 landowners. In these maps, you can see in green the area that has been reforested between 2010 and 2021, mainly in the north and center of Portugal, because that's where we have more eucalyptus. And in the other map, the colors show the different tree species that we have been planted by replacing these fast-growing tree species. This approach arose from the need to increase the resilience of our infrastructures, not only for the related to the fast-growing forest species, but also to be more resilient to the forest fires, to reduce maintenance costs, but also to increase property value that are often abandoned by landowners as they abdicate their management, and to promote biodiversity. This active approach involves the reconversion of the right-of-way corridor and consists in the land use change by converting forest areas into agricultural areas such as olive groves, vineyards, pastures, and others, and the land occupation change by replacing existing fast-growing forest species with native forest species that are compatible with our infrastructures. In this graphic, you can see the evolution, the annual evolution of the reconversion carried out by RAN. And last year was a very strong year. We have replanted more than 700 hectares. And regarding the ESG goals, at the end of 2021, we had 70% of the area, of the forest areas reconverted. Our aim in 2025 is to get 25% of forest areas reconverted, and in 2030, 33%. Here, we can analyze the reforest areas by species until 2021. We have been planting stone pine, strawberry trees, cork oaks, other types or other species of oaks, other hardwoods, but also olive and almond trees. You can see that stone pine still represents most used species, but this year in 2021, this species will surely be replaced or surpassed by the strawberry tree, because this year in 2022, we plan to plant more than 350 hectares of strawberry tree. Well, and why strawberry tree? Here you have the evolution of planted with strawberry tree. As you can see, the last 5 years we went very strong with this species, and this species is compatible with the presence of power line. Is almost a shrub, not really a tree, and it's of great economic interest to the landowner, in particular to the use of its fruits, both in the production of brandy, but in the foodstuffs industry. And in 2021, it represented 57% of the planted area, and we have planted more than 400 hectares last year, only of strawberry tree. I bring you this photograph to show you all of this area that you can see was affected. It's in central Portugal, and it was affected in extreme rural fires in 2017. These areas were abandoned by the landowners, all of it eucalyptus, and also invasive species like acacia. And as part of forestation project promoted by RAN, in these territories, you can see the corridor. The corridor is, you don't see the power lines, but it's 3 power lines parallel. Now thousands of strawberry trees are growing in place of eucalyptus. In the following slides, I will present you some examples of the plantations carried out by RAN in the scope of this initiative. We have olive trees, stone pines, cork oaks, strawberry trees, and other species. And as part of this initiative, we also have carried out some planting actions with students of the first and second cycle of schooling. Moving to the second innovative approach under the ESG Goal 17, Partnership for the Goals. REN have established a protocol with the Association of Garrano Equine Breeders, the Association of the Planning of Serra da Cabreira, and the Municipality of Vieira do Minho for the shared management of an area of 100 hectares. Through this protocol, signed this year, we will implement an innovative approach related to vegetation management using Garrano horses, that is a native animal species, adopting extensive grazing as a tool to reduce the risk of fire. This approach brings together REN and local stakeholders to create shared value, helping to prevent forest fires in this mountainous region and at the same time creating conditions to defend the endangered species, that is Garrano horses. The permanence of about 260 mares and 28 stallions in these high areas mountains will lead them to feed mainly in these areas. As each Garrano horses eats an average of 25 kilograms of food per day, these Garrano horses that live in Serra da Cabreira will feed daily on about 7,000 kilograms of shrubs and herbaceous vegetation, reducing the risk of rural fires. This partnership also includes the participation of the Association of Planning of Serra da Cabreira, which through their forest brigades complement the work that is not carried out by the Garrano horses. In this partnership, REN is responsible for the payment of a certain value per hectare corresponding to the vegetation management carried out by the Garranos through the grazing. Is also responsible for building fences in some specific sections that will prevent Garranos from easily reaching the national road. It's also responsible for creating a system to improve pastures and plant native shrubs in some selected areas, helping the animals to not feel the need to travel to more dangerous areas to find food, as well as contributing to an increase in the biodiversity. REN is also responsible for creating drinking fountains for the animals and also for placing GPS locators on dominant stallions and mares with the aim of monitoring them. So with this partnership, we'll soon have more of these workers on the territory managing the vegetation. I would like to conclude this brief presentation with this photograph, where despite of only being 45 meters wide in the right-of-way, I think it's possible to reconcile various types of vegetation management, such as grazing, invasive species management, reforestation with native species, also the repairing gallery restoration, ecological restoration of native forests, and of course, the full vegetation removal. And also, of course, promoting sustainability, increasing biodiversity, meeting to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and based on the principle of creating shared value. Thank you, and I'm at your disposal for answering any questions.
Thank you very much, Pedro, for that really great overview into work that REN is doing over in Portugal. I think for me, it really shows when we look at things with an open mind, just how many different opportunities there are. You know, we're kind of also crossing over that here into multifunctionality of infrastructure. Better vegetation management doesn't just mean new opportunities for biodiversity, but as you said, for reforestation of native species, for support for grazing of the native animals, partnering with farmers to create new economic opportunities. I think that's a great example of the strawberry trees there. Which I would love to see, by the way, because I once saw a strawberry tree in London and tried the fruit and it was delicious. Who knew that they grew in London? Wonderful. Okay. Once again, we have 2 or 3 minutes time if there's any comprehension questions for Pedro before we go into the final presentation. So you have, I see Olivier Geels has raised a hand from Ilia in Belgium. Please go ahead and feel free to turn your camera on.
There we go. With the micro, it's better. Hello, everybody. So yes, I'm Olivia from ILIA, the Belgian TSO. I have a question for Pedro. First, just to give me a better idea, what are the voltages of your lines? Because they look like very high lines, big lines. And in the case of reforestation projects, does that mean that once you have planted the new trees and found someone to manage them, that you don't have any more vegetation management to do in those areas?
Okay, thank you for your question, Olivia. Yes, they are very high voltage power lines from 150, 220, and 400,000 kilowatts. And regarding the second question, our main objective is to remove the short rotation forestry, mainly eucalyptus, under the power lines, because we cut them and they're still growing and growing, and doesn't bring any benefits to the landowner. On the opposite, they mainly abandon that area, and so the vegetation management it's all on REN. With this initiative, by bringing value to this area, because all the fruits belong to the landowner, okay, the landowner returns and manage the land, but of course REN it's always there, and by law it has to go every 3 years to do the vegetation control because of the rural fires.
Okay, and do you have I see you have pine trees that you plant, and don't they grow too high? Do you have to cut them once in a while, or is it a specific species that don't grow too high?
Sure, all the trees that we planted are slow growing trees, and also we try not to choose trees that can in the future compromise the infrastructure. So that is the stone pine, or Pinus pinea, also called umbrella pine. So if it's correctly managed, it's perfectly compatible with the infrastructure.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, I also see some questions came in from Julieta from SPEA. I would, just with an eye on the clock, Julieta, I would invite you to ask your questions in the discussion after the next presentation, and we'll have 30 minutes time. But onwards then to the next presentation, which unfortunately is me again. You're going to have to listen to me speak for 10 minutes. I will present now a practice again in Spain. You should be able to see my screen now, is that correct? Yes, you're not? Okay, so this project then from Spain, Pastoreo en Red, or grid grazing, was initiated by Eléctrica de España, together in partnership then with 2 universities for the monitoring and evaluation, and also Agrovidar, who is a consultancy company who helped come up with some of the grazing plans. To give some of the background on this practice, I think the colleagues who spoke before me did this really well. But just in terms of why it's necessary again, I mean, if any of you have ever looked at ecology, ecosystems, this diagram here on the right should be very familiar to you. After a fire or after intensive agriculture, this process of secondary succession takes place, where in the first years then there's kind of the establishment of lichens, of small herbaceous vegetations, some pioneer species. This then leads to grasses and perennials, slowly then over into grasses, shrubs, some pines and younger trees, and finally it moves to this climax community of mature oak and other large trees. This is the kind of full canopy that is the natural progression of things. That's all fine and well, and when we're thinking about rewilding, this is fantastic. You know, in certain areas, it's great to move back towards forest. Certainly, we need that. But underneath power lines, grid operators have the responsibility to keep the area free so that there's no risk of forest fires. Traditionally, what's been done since the grid has been a thing has been mechanized management of this, where once every now and again, the grid operator would go down with machines and remove all of the vegetation from the area and effectively reset the whole zone. This project by Eléctrica then asked if an alternative to this traditional vegetation management system couldn't be livestock farming. The objectives of the project, well, first of all, it was a pilot project. So this was really, there was lots of questions that came with it. This was a small project to begin with, to ask the question of, whether this pivot towards nature-based vegetation management can really work, and to get some results, and to learn about the potential benefits for nature, company, and local people. Grid operators, just as anyone really working on infrastructure, on the energy transition, anywhere in society nowadays, has to kind of self-reflect, how can we contribute to renewables targets, but also biodiversity? Now we're facing multiple crises. And so this is perhaps a very promising opportunity to have some positive effects on nature, company, and local people. When we talk about the benefits for nature, then the things we're talking about with regard to grid grazing is higher biodiversity through more open spaces. I think Xavier really put this very clearly before. The process of grazing by the animals, in this case sheep, is nutrient removal to lower the risk of fires catching, but also then nutrient return through the excrement of the animals. This then creates patches where the soil is more fertile and less fertile. And overall, it was hypothesized this would increase organic matter in the soil, increase soil structure and water retention, which would also contribute to reduced risk of forest fires. Of course, another benefit is that when grid operators don't have to bring these giant machines down anymore, there is a reduction in greenhouse gases of the machines not being used, often fossil fuels-based machinery, but also through the increased soil structure, through the increased viability of the ecosystems, it could increase the viability of these areas to actually save and capture CO2. Another objective is to engage rural communities and support traditional farming. And of course, if it was found to be successful, to replicate this and roll it out. You'll find then at the end of this presentation, there was many monitorings, evaluations of the ecosystem services done, but also a methodology for replication was developed, which I think is a really key aspect of this practice, and which you can see on the right here, which is one of the publications developed. So over to implementation then. It's important to underline that this project was in 2 phases as well. The pilot was run in 2020 to 2021, so peak pandemic time, and continued also this year. It was run on the mountain range of Monte Los Agudos in La Rioja, so up here, and particularly then on this one tract of power lines of 220 kV, and particularly the zone in question is a 13-hectare area. One of the first steps to do then was find a partnership, find a shepherd nearby who would come into question to overtake then the grazing, the vegetation management here. And in this case, what was found was a shepherd here. His name is Jesus Garcia Escudero, I believe. And he had a flock of 700 sheep living 2.5 kilometers away, so really lent itself well to the area. First of all, a grazing plan was created together with Agruvidad, which, and I put an exclamation mark here, was extremely important, of course, because it's not the case that the sheep were welcomed onto the land to just munch everything down and really keep vegetation at their minimum. You know, this is the case in many parts of the world where sheep really run the roost. This is the case in where I come from, the UK, where sheep have basically created an ecological desert of the hills. No, according to this grazing plan, the idea would be to allow the sheep in for controlled amounts of time. In the first time, this was 20 days of 7-hour grazing. In 2022, this was 6-hour grazing slots to, yes, keep the vegetation down, but also to allow some recovery then between grazing slots. For 2022, it's important to mention that because of the extremely high temperatures and low rainfall, this was paused in May and will resume in September. Any of the colleagues in Red Electrica in the audience are welcome to join and comment on this afterwards. Evaluation and field visits. where the University of Alcalá and also Autónoma de Barcelona did biodiversity sampling points focusing on plants and arthropods. There was trappings across 9 different points across 3 zones. And to make sure this is scientifically standard, there were 3 zones of comparison. The first one being grid with grazing, the second one being a part of the grid without grazing, and then the third was a control in the nearby forest area. Finally, then, a part of the monitoring was done with drone flights to determine the coverage of vegetation over the area. So the results then, what happened? And we'll start with the environmental points here. So it was found that through trampling, through ingestion and manuring of the area by the sheep, that increased soil fertility and filtration capacity did happen. The vegetation, most importantly, was prevented from growing into scrub and to higher, taller trees. So this succession to herbaceous vegetation really did take place. And that also then filled the aim of reducing forest fire risk in these areas. The biodiversity, the indicators for biodiversity really did show strength in biodiversity for plants and arthropods, including for pollinators. They also calculated a greenhouse gas reduction, as said, with regards to the lack of machinery that was then needed, and in terms of soil health and CO2 storage in the soils then as well. And in terms of the social impacts of the project then, it really did support the local shepherding culture. I mean, this, in many ways, this partnership then gave the shepherd access to new grazing resources, which are perhaps scarce, directly because the shepherd was paid for this service. It's a brand new income stream for the farmer. In phase 1, this was 1,700 euros in total. But as well as the financial viability of the practice, this also has a really nice element to it of intergenerational learning. By entering directly into partnership with shepherds who in some cases have worked the lands for many, many years, there's a direct exchange of knowledge between industry, civil society organizations, scientists, but also then the people who work the land and really have this local knowledge. And this is then a real benefit for everyone involved. So I think this intergenerational and intergenerational learning aspect really shouldn't be underestimated. And finally, and something that I spoke about briefly before, another positive effect that came from this is the relationship between the grid operator and local communities. This is direct engagement with people who probably otherwise wouldn't even think about the grid. I think something we talk about a lot at RGI is how to really engage people to create ownership for energy infrastructure, of course, with a look to create acceptance and to really bring people on board with the energy transition. I think vegetation management, when done right in this way, really creates new opportunities for people to come into close contact with energy infrastructure and see that people have a stake as well. It's no longer the case that people are shut out. These are not useless areas. Grid operators in many examples are looking for ways to bring local people on board. And I think that's a really clear benefit of practices such as this. Just briefly then on dissemination and replication then, once the grazing was done, the project was by no means done. And Red Eléctrica immediately began to think about how to replicate this project within other regions of Spain, of course, accounting for geographical diversity. There's many different ecosystems, many different biospheres across Spain. They developed practical guides for sectoral forums, trainings and things like this. You can see here on the right. There was a practical guide developed into network grazing overall, into the benefits of network grazing and services for human welfare, and the guide on the evaluation for ecosystem services. As far as I'm aware, these are available in Spanish, but these are really then useful documents which other grid operators can use to see the benefits of the project, but also then to follow up in a scientific way on evaluating and running this really efficiently. Info materials were created also for other farmers, so that farmers, they didn't have to speak directly to Jesus. If they couldn't reach him, they could read these documents and find out for themselves. This practice was nominated for recognition underneath RGI's Good Practice of the Year Award. This is an annual award that we use, and this was analyzed by our expert jury, and they really, really liked this project. You know, I mean, for the reasons already listed, this is something that should be celebrated, should be spread, and this also, I believe, helped with to disseminate the results. As well, though, the Spanish TSO has been in touch with other EU TSOs to spread the results and to try and inspire other people. And of course, then there's been wide dissemination in the press and online. There are many articles out there about this practice. Magazine interviews with the farmer, for example. They also jumped on the radio to disseminate the approach. And this is, again, another interesting point, I think. As soon as something out of the normal begins to happen, as soon as people show innovation with the methods that they're working, the public wants to hear about it and the media gets on board. Finally, and similar to how Pedro explained was in the case in Portugal, there was the involvement of young people, in this case, in the form of an environmental education campaign. Just finally, before I finish up then, we've just had a really zoom in on the Spanish practice, but other practices of grid grazing do exist in Europe. You may be familiar with the Life Ilia project over in Belgium and France, and Portugal actually in the end. Here in Belgium, I believe it was, Highland cattle were used in pastures near public paths to do similar things of ecosystem services, but also to build public awareness. And because these are such emblematic animals, engage people in conversations around why things like pasturage can be beneficial for the ecosystems. This was also done then to renew grassy vegetation, create disturbances, diversify habitats, and to support the restoration of peatlands in some instances, moors and sparse meadows. Another fantastic project, which I recently found out about from Germany, which was led by the Landscape Conservation Society of West Sachsen in Saxony in Germany, in collaboration with 50 Hertz, the TSO, and Midnetz, the DSO, and a University of Dresden, also used sheep under power lines to strengthen regional biodiversity and support then the conservation of existing species and give opportunities to new species. Again, this includes new pasturing areas for shepherds, so benefits for local people. And this project also really set a lot of attention on bringing together diverse actors in a living network. And this includes, of course, NGOs, industry, local people, developers, farmers. Exactly. So those are a couple more examples. And that is the end of my presentation. So I will now stop sharing screen and welcome you all to please, if you feel comfortable, turn on your video so that we can see each other. And then we'll start moving through questions then. To begin with, just need to catch up with the chat. So I would maybe give the word to start with to Julieta, who started, who asked while Pedro was presenting. Julieta, if you're still with us, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Thank you. I found the REN presentation very interesting. I wrote my questions here, but I will speak them anyway. For how do you comply with your works with the existing legislation on forest fire prevention? I ask this because our legislation is quite strict and doesn't not allow, for example, it is quite strict for shrubland. And so I would like to know how do you do this? How do you make it compatible? The other question is if REN, besides the monitoring programs that you told, if you are monitoring for an assessment of the overall ecological value, or at least based on key species or key groups. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Julieta, for your questions. Regarding the comply with the existing legislation, Well, you said that it's quite strictly that legislation it imposes very strict vegetation management, considering not only shrubs but also trees. But with this kind of interventions, we think we are make it compatible, because you don't have to remove all the trees. You can have some trees, and that's the trees that we are planting. All of these projects are approved by the National Authority Forestry, so they are complying to the legislation. But yes, it's hard, and it's a challenge to be able to comply with that legislation. Regarding the monitoring of flora and fauna, we have a Cátedra of Biodiversity in Rennes with CBU, and we are now developing some monitoring in our right of way in order to identify some biodiversity hotspots. We think it's only a small project, and we believe that we need to apply to all the network in order to gain more information and to help us to decision making.
Okay, thank you. If I can, I will ask one more question.
Go ahead.
The examples you gave were mostly when the lines cross production forest or eucalyptus forest, which are actually not a big thing for ecological value. But how do you do the management when you are crossing conservation forests or anyway habitats that are that have high ecological values? Do you try to preserve them, or how?
Yes, of course. It's a great question, because that conservation of those forests, it's difficult to be compatible with the existing legislation of forest fires. So we have to compromise, and regarding, for example, the cork oaks in the south of Portugal, we only do the vegetation in the shrubs, and we don't intervene in the trees.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. There's come a few questions in about cost. There's one here from David Gonzalez Garcia and one from Annika Lem. I would maybe try and bundle these questions. First of all, I mean, this goes to Hen, but also to the colleagues in the audience from Red Eléctrica. If you can answer this, then please go ahead. Have you estimated if the work in the case of pastoreo or the Portuguese practices have had an impact on TSO operational expenditures, neutral, increase or decrease? And if they've had an increase, do you still see the possibility of including this in regulated remuneration scheme? So that's one very clear question. A second one from Annika would be a specific one on the pastoreo. How is the income for the shepherd generated? Was it paid for by the TSO? I believe so, Annika, but I'll let the colleagues from Spain answer this in my place. Who would like to answer first?
Well, I can try to answer the first one. It's a difficult question. I think the operational expenditures, to consider this an investment, first of all, because as I said, with our plan, our integrated vegetation management plan, one of the strategic objectives is, of course, the reduction of the cost and try to be as efficient as possible. And with this kind of intervention, we can do that. In the areas that we have reconverted or reforested, the costs regarding the vegetation management decrease in those areas because we can mechanize them. And so the service provider reflect that in the price that they give to us. The regulator, I think the regulator in at least that's my feeling. I think in Portugal is trying to open this kind of management. It's open to this kind of management and to allow the TSOs and DSOs to implement this kind of activities related to vegetation management and integration of sustainability. I think it's a future, and so they have also to allow this kind of operations and integrate them in the remuneration schemes. Regarding the income for the shepherds, in our case, in our project, it's one of our responsibilities to pay an amount per hectare for the area that the grazing that is done by the Garrano horse is done.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, in answer to the other question that came in, Annika, we had just an answer from Isabel Garcia Morato from Eléctrica, who said that the pastor is paid directly by the TSO at Eléctrica, and they've been able to confirm that grazing is an effective tool for clearing vegetation in safety streets, both under and above the gas pipelines. Before we move on, just wanted to ask David if your question was answered as well. Do you have anything to follow up with?
Well, I would be also interested. Thank you. It would also be interested in knowing, in the case of Red Eléctrica, whether there was an impact in OPEX and whether they see the regulator open to this, to remunerate this kind of biodiversity management activities.
So the question was, is this cost overtaken then by the grid operator, and was there an openness by the regulator to take over these costs?
From Red Eléctrica. Thank you,
Yeah,
David and Liam for this. And well, yes, the cost is taken by Red Eléctrica, and for the time being, with regards to cost recognition, is still to be discussed.
And this was an increase in cost, or or was it neutral compared to using the mechanical grazing, mechanical vegetation control?
Mm-hmm. For this extent, I will need to check. Sorry, David.
No worries. Thank you.
If I can, I would just bring in some of the results that I know from other projects. I know that the Ilia Live project, together with EcoFirst, for which Jean-François is in the audience, they did a long-term study of the cost-benefit analysis of integrated vegetation management, and they found that over a 30-year time frame, it's estimated that the costs, despite the initial investment costs, the costs would overall go down by a factor of between 1.4 and 3.9. Of course, this is a very it's a broad estimation. Also, there's many different realities across Europe, but the cost estimation study that they did was quite clear on this, and I will try and share the link in the chat for this. I wanted also to invite you, Jean-François, if you have the question from before, or if you have any perspective to bring in, please do go ahead and ask a question.
Okay. Thank you, Lime. Yeah, then thank you all of you for this very interesting presentations. Yes, my question, I'm jumping back on the butterflies. I had a question to Xavier. If you could give some words on maybe on the type of species that were encountered in the way, did you observe like very open habitat specialist species that appeared under the electric lines? And do you think that because of this cycle of evolution of the vegetation, which is appearing, where you have open habitats appearing and then disappearing later, do you believe that the role of reservoir can also be seen sometime in some cases as ecological traps? And then to connect it to this, do you have some comments about the type of management which would be ideal for this conservation of this species?
Thanks for the question. About butterflies, we checked many indicators. One was butterflies, because as Jean-Francois says, butterflies are really well described, each species, for having like some matching with open spaces or closed spaces. So we can use every species like a bioindicator of openness. And yes, of course, in the open areas, in the areas under the line with forest management, we found species that were matching open areas needs. And in the forest, we only found or species that likes closed areas, or a species that can fly by these areas to find another hotspot somewhere. And we found sometimes really strange species that butterflies, the nice thing they have is sometimes they live in a really small area, because they look for its nutrition plan for doing the nest, the breeding, and that's it. So they have like a really small distribution area, so was matching the area of the managed areas under the grid. So yeah, butterflies under the grid love more open spaces than butterflies in the forest nearby that were really close. And this second question, you say that they can be islands of biodiversity or they can be traps, because if we focus all the biodiversity in there, yes, of course, there is this way of seeing these areas, but butterflies, they can jam. So yeah, if there is a fire and one of these places disappear, they will disappear all. But in the same time, they can fly to the next oasis or the next tower or the next open space in the forest. So they are tied, of course, to open areas. I don't know if I answer your question in this point. And about the management, we already have tried, or we have checked biodiversity with different management systems. Management, as you said before, it's really in the regulation, in the legislation. And we did this in a natural park that even it's more complicated, because when they have to cut the trees, they have to leave the trees in, I don't know, a 2-meter height. They only can cut 50% of the shrubs. And in the places where we have checked different kind of forest management, we have seen that after the management, after the machinery arrived there and cut the vegetation, there is like a descent of all these species, of course, but rapidly, really fast, it's recovered. So these species have like a mobility, and they can recolonize really fast these areas. And which would be the best way to manage these areas? This is something in somehow we were saying, oh, it would be really nice if you leave some shrubs, if you leave some trees, if we have like a mosaic habitat. But in some places where they do a really intense management and they cut all, we found a species that it's really in danger. It's really in danger, and it's because this is the last citation of this species in the Iberian Peninsula live under the grid, under the power lines, because of the management. Montañesa de primavera, that species love its nutrition plants is Plantago. Plantago, it's a plant that is one of the first ones to colonize, but really fast disappear. So this species is always there because of that area. It's maintained really low. So which is the best management? I don't know. The thing I know, it's the importance of the time of the year the management is done. If we do the management in spring or in June, where all the eggs are in the plant, all the chrysalides are on the plants, it's a big impact. If we do it in autumn or winter, species even do not notice. So maybe the questions would not be which is the best management system, would be when it's the best moment to manage the forest. I don't know, Jean-Francois, if I answer your questions.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the question was tackling different topics, and you try to jump from one to the other. Thank you. For sure, the model that is used, what is butterfly or another type of species, would give probably some other result or some other thought, because as you said, butterflies are very mobile. Maybe other organisms would react differently, but the point behind that, and I know that you're all convinced about this, is that any method that promote a more stable habitat because of the management which is used, like for example with grazing, is very suitable to keep some species which are very specialized to occupy, to colonize open habitats and live there. But yeah, thank you for your many different comments.
Thanks to both of you. I see another couple of questions in the chat, but I think I'm going to seize my power as the moderator to ask another question, which is burning a little bit for me. A question open to the presenters, to Eléctrica, but also to anyone in the public. Have you experienced through these integrated vegetation management methods, through these innovative practices, that there has been an impact on public perception and public engagement in terms of the communication, or I don't know, members of the public getting in touch with you directly? Has there been a shift in public perception here? I don't know who wants to go first. Feel free to jump in.
I will answer.
Oh.
Yeah, first of all, Xavier, and then Pedro.
Okay.
I don't know if it's in public perception, but at least in academic perception, when we, and also with conservationist NGOs, when we said we were starting this project to change the point of view of these areas, many people thought we were like crazy because power lines are really bad, and I don't know, these topics. And then we start talking to people, and people said, oh yeah, endangered butterflies there. Oh, a lot of biodiversity in solitary bees are there. Oh no, orchids, really interesting species that only are there. And people start to realize that many endangered species, or many really strange species, only have the opportunity to live in these places where they have like perturbance, but not in a really high rate. So in the academic or in the conservationist world, they open a little bit the eyes on changing the perception of these areas. So this is the thing we have seen with our project.
Thank you very much. So yeah, it's not to be understated, the perception of academia. Great. Pedro, please, over to you. Isabel, I see you want to comment maybe on Xavier's impulse. Isabel from...
Oh, yes. Hi, Liam. I don't know if you can hear me now. Okay. Yeah. So, yes, from our side, well, as you mentioned before, we have been doing some education and promotion of the Pastoreo on Red program through elaboration of informative material for students at schools, and also in well, an environmental education campaign also with the schools in Calahorra, in León. And also we have made some communication actions through interviews to the shepherd in one of very well-known magazines in Spain. We have also a video in YouTube also in English and in Spanish to promote the project. And also we have participated in a radio program in one of the most well-known radio stations in Spain in order to defend the project. I don't know if that answered your questions.
Yeah, that's good to know. You really communicated well about this project. Thank you as well. Pedro, over to you.
Sorry.
Okay, thank you. The main feedback that we have is regarded to the landowners. We have landowners that come directly to RAN and said to us, are you open to convert or to plant my property? And that's quite interesting because there's a shift of the relation that between RAN and the landowners. From the moment that we increase the property value, that you give option to landowners that think that those areas are to be abandoned, there's a shift on their minds and they came to us, and now there's a partnership. This is a partnership not for life, but for many years. So it's interesting, this difference and this approach and this coming together to resolve a problem. Regarding to communications, yes, of course, when you do these actions, these planting actions with the schools, there are social media, local and national, even when we signed the protocol with the association to the Garrano horses, it has national coverage. So I think, yes, the public awareness is being done, and I think it's going to have good results. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything at this point.
Yes, thank you, Liam. Jesus, again, building on what my colleagues said, I would like to highlight as well that the project of Pastoreo en Red as well gives additional social acceptance in the local and regional institutions as well. So they feel more like willingness. I mean, we have felt a lot of more willingness to contact with us and to do the projects with us, starting from this hook, which is putting communities together and having this type of projects in the land. No.
Thank you very much, Jesus. That's another really positive thing to come from this project. Wonderful. I have got my eye on the clock and I see that we have 2 minutes to go. So I would ask if there's any burning questions in the group which really need to be put out there. You can also write these in the chat and we'll try to get back to you. But otherwise, I would just round off by saying thank you for being here. As I said at the start, the aim of these webinars is really to bring people together who work on these topics and to share experiences, to share information which can help us to inspire other people working in the field to do best practices, but also to create a kind of community of exchange long-term between the groups. I will be in touch with all of you to send you the recording and the links to the presentations, but I will also be in touch regarding activities that we have in the future. Next year in June, we will have workshops in presence in Belgium, working with EcoFirst, actual training workshops on integrated vegetation management, where you're very welcome to join. And like I said, we want this to be a living community of best practices so that we can really learn and inspire each other. Finally, just allow me to plug some upcoming events on our side. RGI, as you know, works a lot on offshore environment as well. We have a webinar coming up on the 29th of November on the Belgian energy islands, so nature positive development of infrastructure offshore. And as well, on the 23rd of November, we have a workshop looking at how to protect bird species around onshore wind infrastructure. We will be communicating about all of these events in the coming weeks, but we'd love to see you all there as well, so that we can keep exchanging on similar but related topics. Apart from that, let me just say thank you again. It's been a really interesting exchange, and thank you so much to the speakers who joined us, Xavier, Pedro, everyone involved. It's a real pleasure for me to present, and thank you as well for the engaging discussion at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Oh.